Welcome, listeners. I'm Silas, your sleepy storyteller, pulling you down the rabbit hole of time, where dreams and memories intertwine. If you enjoy these videos, please tap the like button. It really helps. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can keep drifting along on your sleepy journey through history. And before we wander down the rabbit hole, share your city and time in the comments. I love imagining our journey threading through every ticking clock. Now, take a moment to find a comfortable resting position. Close your eyes gently, and in your own time, allow yourself to sink into the quiet atmosphere of the past as we begin our slow journey together. The air is colder now. Where once warm summer winds stirred the tall grasses of Pennsylvania, tonight, a thin veil of frost lies across the earth, glittering faintly beneath the moonlight. My boots crunch against the hardened stubble of harvested fields, and every step carries the weight of memory. It has been only a few months since my last walk here in Gettysburg. Then, it was the cusp of battle, the eve of destruction, when fields like these trembled with anticipation of armies pressing closer. Now, the battle is over, the dead buried, and yet the ground still hums with echoes of cannon fire. And tonight is different. Tonight is Thanksgiving, the first national Thanksgiving proclaimed by President Abraham Lincoln himself. Only weeks ago, in October, Lincoln issued his solemn words, penned by Secretary of State William Seward, calling the last Thursday of November a day of thanksgiving and praise. It was not Sarah Josepha Hale's first letter urging such a day. She had written for decades, pleading for a unifying observance to stitch a fraying nation together. But it was this year, after the Union's victories at Vicksburg and here at Gettysburg, that Lincoln answered. He called on the people not merely to celebrate bounty, but to reflect with humility, to seek healing, and to bind up the wounds of a war that has torn the Republic almost in two. And so here I walk again, through the heart of Gettysburg, not in summer's tense anticipation, but in late autumn's morning quiet. This is a Thanksgiving unlike the modern kind. There are no great feasts here, no noisy gatherings. Instead, doors wear black wreaths, barns lean heavy with sorrow, and churches echo with hymns more penitential than joyful. Gratitude tonight is a fragile flame against the darkness of grief. Cemetery Ridge rises ahead of me, its long crest etched in silver frost beneath the starlight. The ground here was once thunder itself, the keystone of the Union line in July. Men bled into this earth, fought across its stone walls and rail fences, and now all that remains is silence. I climb slowly, my breath pluming in the chill night. Each step crackles against frozen soil, where in summer grass whispered gently in the breeze. I pause at the crest and let my eyes sweep across the fields. In July, cannon wheels tore ruts through these slopes. Infantry lines stretched across the ridge, their muskets bristling like teeth. Smoke curled thick, blotting out the horizon. Now, only frost glimmers where men once fell, the ground appearing almost peaceful, almost healed, yet beneath lies the memory of over 50,000 casualties in those 3 terrible days. I rest my hand on the cold stone of a low wall. It feels solid, ordinary, yet it was once the shield behind which boys huddled, firing blindly into the smoke. I whisper to it, though I do not know why. You remember more than you show. The ridge is hushed now, but in the hush, imagination plays cruel tricks. I hear the faint roll of distant cannon, though no artillery fires tonight. I hear a murmur of commands shouted by men long buried, and above it all, I hear Lincoln's words, spoken only weeks ago at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery, that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. Those words still hang over this place like frost clings to the fields. They transform the ridge from mere ground into a threshold between past and promise. And as I stand here, I realize this Thanksgiving itself is part of that new birth, an act of defiance against despair, a nation whispering gratitude even while blood is still drying in the soil. From the ridge, my path slopes downward toward the Spangler farm. In summer, I passed here and imagined its barns filled with straw and livestock. I pictured its orchard heavy with fruit. Now, I see it for what it became. The barn looms against the moonlight, its great timbers dark and scarred. In July, this was a hospital, a crucible of agony. Wagons creaked to its doors, carrying broken bodies. Surgeons worked by lantern light, their saws rasping through bone, their hands slick with blood. Cries rose and fell like tides, and the very rafters trembled beneath the sound. I walk slowly along the low stone wall, the frost crunching underfoot. In the distance, I see lanterns glowing faintly from the farmhouse. The Spanglers are inside tonight, gathered around a modest meal. It is Thanksgiving, though their feast is humble. Bread, perhaps some salted pork, root vegetables dug from storage. More important than food is the act itself, their attempt to reclaim the ordinary against the backdrop of the extraordinary. Yet the farm cannot easily forget. The barn doors still bear stains, dark patches in the wood where blood seeped deep. The orchard hides shallow graves once dug in haste. Even the soil itself is warped, churned by wagon wheels, stained by what the earth was forced to receive. I pause by the barn doors, laying my hand on the wood. The timbers are rough, cold, but in my mind, they pulse faintly with the memory of pain. I whisper, gratitude feels different here. It is not about plenty, but survival. Not about harvest, but endurance. A wind stirs, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke from the farmhouse. I hear laughter faintly within, a child perhaps, though even their laughter sounds tentative. It is a reminder that life presses forward, even when scarred. And perhaps that is what Thanksgiving means in Gettysburg this year. Not celebration, but the fragile insistence that life endures even in the shadow of death. As I turn back toward the ridge, the stars above glitter cold and distant. The frost crunches louder in the stillness, each step sounding like glass breaking. I think of Sarah Josepha Hale, who pressed for decades for this holiday. Did she imagine it would come like this? Amid war, grief, and blood? Perhaps she did. Perhaps she knew that gratitude matters most, not in times of ease, but in times of anguish. Lincoln's proclamation speaks of humility, of penitence, of prayer for the wounded and the widowed. I see them all here in Gettysburg, mothers with black shawls, widowers walking alone, children pressing flowers against new graves. This Thanksgiving is for them, not to deny their pain, but to bind it with the thread of remembrance and hope. As I walk back into the night, the Spangler lanterns glowing faintly behind me, I realize something else. Thanksgiving is not just about gratitude for blessings. It is gratitude as resistance, a refusal to let despair claim the final word. The frost glitters on Cemetery Ridge as if the earth itself agrees. The frost still lingers as I step away from Cemetery Ridge and follow a narrow lane eastward, where the silhouette of a modest farmhouse waits against the November night. In July, this little dwelling, plain, whitewashed, hardly remarkable, was the beating heart of the Union Army. General George Gordon Meade, newly appointed commander of the Army of the Potomac, took these walls for his headquarters. From here, maps were spread across rough tables, orders scrawled in haste, and couriers galloped away into the storm of battle. But tonight, the Leicester House stands quiet again, its small windows glimmering faintly with lamplight. A thin plume of smoke curls from the chimney, carrying with it the scent of wood and humble suppers. It is Thanksgiving, and the family who owns this farm has reclaimed their home, not without effort, not without sorrow. Their walls, once pierced by shells, are patched but not forgotten. Their orchard, once trampled by brigades, now grows quiet in winter's dormancy. Yet the memory of July clings to this ground as stubbornly as frost clings to the stubble fields. I pause at the fence line, resting my hands against the cold wood. In the summer's walk, I pictured the parlor filled with men in blue uniforms, their faces shadowed by candlelight, their voices clipped with urgency. The air then reeked of sweat, ink, and anticipation. Orders drafted here sent men to fight and many to die. Every map laid upon these tables became a ledger of lives wagered against fate. Now, the parlor is empty again. The soldiers are gone, the maps rolled up, the ink dried. The cracks in the plaster remain, faint lines where shells rattled the walls, small reminders that war intruded even here. A rocking chair sits by the hearth, where once a general hunched over maps. A hymn drifts softly from within. The family's attempt to fill the silence with something holier than war. I whisper to the night, General Meade, do you know how history has judged you? They call this your victory, though you claimed it with more survival than triumph. They say you stood firm, though you too bore doubt. Yet here, in these walls, you held the Union line, and for that the nation breathes still. The wind stirs faintly, rattling the bare branches near the house. I imagine the ghosts of aides-de-camp still pacing the yard, their boots crunching against gravel, their eyes darting nervously to the horizon. War lingers in places even after the armies leave. And tonight, on Thanksgiving, I feel the tension between two worlds. The ordinary life the Leicester family longs to reclaim, and the extraordinary burden history has forced upon them. I step closer, laying my hand on the doorframe. The wood is rough, cool to the touch, but steady. It has endured both cannon fire and command, and it endures still. Inside, the family gathers around their table. Their voices rise in quiet hymn, not joyous, but resolute. Gratitude here is not loud. It is whispered, hard-won, and edged with grief. Leaving the Leicester home, I follow the lane back toward the heart of Gettysburg. The night is sharp now, the frost thickening across the grass, turning each blade into a shard of silver. My breath clouds before me, curling into the dark. The town's lamps grow brighter as I near them, halos of amber swaying in the breeze. Along the road, I see scars still visible from July. Fence rails shattered, barns patched hurriedly, stone walls pocked by shot. Gettysburg has worked hard to mend itself, yet every scar whispers that healing is not forgetting. The people know this too, for their steps are slower tonight, their laughter hushed. Thanksgiving is not abundance here, but survival. A prayer spoken into the cold, asking only for peace. The road bends into Steinwehr Avenue, where the Dobbin House Tavern rises against the night. Its stone walls glimmer faintly in lantern light, older and sturdier than most of the wooden homes around it. Built for travelers, it once promised rest, ale, and cheer. In summer, I envisioned those rooms filled with groans instead of laughter, surgeons bending over tables turned into operating boards, blood soaking the straw scattered across its floors. Now I approach again, and though laughter flickers faintly from within, it is tempered, subdued, like a flame struggling against wind. I push open the door and step inside. At once, warmth wraps around me. The smell of wood smoke, the tang of ale, the faint spice of roasting meat. Yet beneath it all lies something heavier, something unshakable. The tavern is alive again, but it has not forgotten. Travelers sit at rough-hewn tables, their voices low, their mugs raised not in celebration, but in solace. In one corner, a man in blue uniform nurses a drink, his sleeve pinned where an arm once was. His eyes stare into the fire, distant, as though seeing not flames, but the memory of cannon flashes. Across from him, another soldier leans on a crutch, his boot absent, his pant leg tied neatly above the knee. They sip in silence, their presence reminding all that the war is far from over, even if the battle here has passed. At another table, townsfolk speak quietly, their words weaving gratitude with grief. At least the house still stands, one murmurs. At least we are alive. Another nods, lifting her cup to lips that tremble slightly. They do not boast of bounty, for their feast is modest, their bellies only half full. Their gratitude is not for plenty, but for endurance, for surviving July, for seeing November at all. I walk deeper into the tavern, my boots scuffing against planks darkened by both age and memory. Every bench, every table feels heavy. The laughter of years past cannot return fully, not yet. The echoes of groans linger too strongly, the walls too deeply etched by what they have witnessed. I pause near the hearth, watching as flames curl upward, their light dancing against stone walls. In summer, I imagined lanterns casting harsher shadows, illuminating saws and knives, catching on surgeons' hands slick with blood. The fire tonight is warmer, gentler, but I cannot help seeing both truths at once. The tavern as it is, and the tavern as it was. A soldier catches my eye from across the room. His face is young, though lined already by suffering. He raises his cup in silent acknowledgement. I nod in return, and in that small gesture lies the essence of this Thanksgiving: recognition. Not of bounty, not of victory alone, but of endurance, of the human capacity to continue even when scarred. As I step back into the night, the tavern's warmth fading behind me, the frost greets me once more. The stars wheel slowly overhead, steady and indifferent. My breath curls white into the dark. I think of the Leicester House, where decisions shaped history, where the weight of command pressed heavily on one man's shoulders. I think of the Dobbin House, where laughter once turned to lament, where wounds were bound even as lives slipped away. Both places now reclaimed, both still carrying scars. And I think of this Thanksgiving, born not of plenty, but of need. Sarah Josepha Hale's decades of letters, Lincoln's solemn proclamation, Seward's careful pen, they all converge here in places like Gettysburg, where gratitude must coexist with grief. The people of this town do not feast as once they did. They bow their heads over simple meals, whispering prayers that feel both fragile and fierce. Gratitude here is not naive, it is defiant. It insists that life continues, that hope endures, that even scarred walls and wounded men can gather in warmth in Him. As I walk onward into the cold, I feel the weight of that defiance settle in my own chest. Thanksgiving tonight is not about forgetting the battle. It is about remembering and still choosing to give thanks. The night deepens as I follow Baltimore Street, its cobblestones gleaming faintly under the flicker of oil lamps. Frost rims the stones, crunching beneath my boots, while the breath of townsfolk lingers in pale clouds at doorways and windows. Thanksgiving in Gettysburg is quieter than most places. No parades, no grand feasts spilling into the streets. Only the solemn rhythm of hymns drifting from parlors, the careful clatter of plates carrying meager suppers to small tables. As I walk, I feel the street itself remembering. The summer's heat once carried the thunder of musket fire down these blocks, the echo of cannon bursts shaking the shutters, the cries of soldiers and civilians mingling in terror. Now, November's chill carries a different sound, the low hum of prayer, the rustle of families gathered close, the whispered names of those absent forever. 2 houses loom along this stretch, ordinary homes, civilian lives caught in the storm of July, unwilling yet permanent participants in history. Tonight, their windows flicker with Thanksgiving candles. But beneath the glow lies something deeper, something unshakable. The Shriver House rises first, its red brick standing firm against the cold. By its appearance tonight, one might think it merely a home, lace curtains drawn with care, candles burning faintly in the parlor, a wreath of autumn leaves hung in quiet remembrance on the door. Yet I know its story, and the story clings to its walls like smoke. George and Hetty Shriver built this place with hope. Its rooms were meant for laughter, for children's footsteps, for a saloon in the rear where townsfolk could gather for cheer. But in July, war conscripted this home. Confederate sharpshooters climbed into the attic, pressing rifle barrels through its brickwork to fire down on Union soldiers. Each shot rattled the house with violence, embedding the structure itself into battle. I pause at the stoop, hand brushing the cold iron railing. I imagine the attic above, its floorboards creaking beneath boots, the sharp crack of rifles splitting the air. Powder smoke curling into rooms once filled with laughter, each window pane trembling as the house itself became a weapon. The family had fled, forced to abandon their dreams to the war that made their home a fortress. Now, on this November night, the house is reclaimed. I glimpse the glow of candles in the parlor, the silhouettes of family gathered around a table. They bow their heads in prayer, giving thanks not for plenty, but for survival. Yet I wonder, how do you give thanks beneath ceilings that still smell faintly of powder? How do you whisper gratitude in a home whose attic bore the weight of death? The hymn drifts faintly through the window, voices rising in fragile harmony. Now, thank we all our God. Their song trembles, not from lack of faith, but from the strain of memory. They sing into walls that have heard gunfire, into rafters still etched with smoke, into bricks still pitted by rifle cracks. I step back, looking up at the dark outline of the attic window. To me, it glares like an unhealed wound. I whisper softly into the frost. Homes were meant to shelter life, not to deliver death. And yet here you stand, ordinary made extraordinary, innocence pressed into memory. The Shriver house does not answer. Its silence feels heavy, layered, like the hush that follows both prayer and battle. I turn, my boots crunching softly, and continue along Baltimore Street. Only a short walk further, another structure rises, brick again, taller, older, its windows gazing steadily into the night. The Farnsworth house. Tonight, its lanterns burn low, and a faint glow from the hearth flickers through curtains. Yet it too bears its scars. Openly, I approach the wall and run my fingers across its surface. The bricks are pitted, gouged, scarred by over 100 bullet strikes. They are permanent, etched testimonies in stone. Every mark whispers of July, when sharpshooters fired from its attic windows, when Union rifles returned fire, when walls became shields and graves all at once. Inside, I imagine the rooms, quiet tonight, but heavy. In July, the air would have been thick with powder, the sound of rifles cracking through the attic, the screams of men struck by counterfire echoing through hallways. Families once sought rest here. Instead, its floors became stained with cries. Now, on Thanksgiving, the inn is alive again, though changed. The hearth crackles in the main room, flames casting amber light across faces drawn with weariness. A soldier sits with his wife and child, his uniform sleeve pinned at the shoulder, his smile thin but sincere as he watches his daughter nibble at a piece of bread. Another group of travelers, their coats worn, sip ale quietly, speaking only in fragments, snatches of gratitude, murmurs of loss. The laughter of tavern days has not returned fully. It hovers, tentative, like a ghost uncertain if it belongs. The room breathes with both warmth and weight. Gratitude here is scarred, tempered by memory. I place my palm against the brick again, feeling the roughness beneath my skin. Each pit is a testimony, each scar a reminder that even walls cannot forget. I whisper to the stone, even gratitude here is scarred, yet still you stand, offering warmth to the weary, shelter to the wounded. Your scars are not shame, they are truth. The flames inside crackle louder, as though in reply. The hearth remembers both laughter and cries, and in its glow, I see the paradox of Gettysburg's Thanksgiving. Families giving thanks beneath ceilings that absorbed death, raising cups beside walls marked forever by bullets. As I step back into the chill night, both houses linger in my vision. The Shriver House, where ordinary life was conscripted into war. The Farnsworth House, where bullets etched permanence into stone. Both reclaimed, both scarred, both carrying gratitude weighted with grief. Baltimore Street itself seems to hum with memory. Each lamp flickers like a heartbeat. Each window glows like a vigil. Families gather within, whispering prayers not for plenty, but for peace. The town breathes together, scarred but alive, offering thanks that feels defiant against despair. I walk slowly, boots crunching over frost, breath clouding into stars. I think of Lincoln's proclamation, how he called for a day of thanksgiving and praise, urging citizens to be grateful for the Union's victories, to pray for the wounded, widows, and orphans. Here in Gettysburg, his words cut deeper than most places. Gratitude here is not abstraction. It is survival, lived in houses that can never return to innocence. As I leave Baltimore Street behind, I glance back once more. The Shriver House stands with its attic window dark, the echoes of sharpshooters lingering still. The Farnsworth House glows faintly, its bullet-scarred bricks lit by the flicker of its hearth. Together, they speak the truth of this Thanksgiving. That gratitude does not erase grief. It grows beside it, fragile and fierce. And so I walk onward into the night, carrying their whispers with me. The center of Gettysburg lies ahead, its square drawn in lamplight and memory. My boots carry me westward from Baltimore Street, where family houses whisper their wounds toward the pulse of commerce and command. Here, in the town's very heart, the scars of July remain etched not just in brick, but in the lives of every soul who walks these streets. The lamps burn steady tonight, haloed by frost. Wagons stand idle, their wheels rimmed in ice, while a horse tied near the post snorts into the night air, its breath clouding white. The town square is quieter than it was in summer, but the silence feels layered, less with dread, more with exhaustion. Thanksgiving has been proclaimed by the president himself, yet here, the proclamation feels less like a feast and more like a vigil. The first structure to rise before me is the Fahnestock building, tall and commanding, its brick face catching the lamplight. Built as a mercantile center, it towers above the square like a sentinel, its roofline sharp against the November sky. In July, I imagined it filled with officers and townsfolk clambering to its rooftop, desperate for a vantage point from which to glimpse the storm breaking over their fields. I imagined General Oliver Howard using its height to set his command, scanning the horizon for the Confederate tide. Now, months later, the rooftop still draws people upward, but no longer do they climb for smoke and strategy. They climb to watch the slow rebuilding of their town. From its height, the damage is visible. Farms pocked with graves, barns roofless from shells, orchards scattered with broken fences. From here, too, one can see flags draped from windows and eaves, fluttering in the crisp air. Those flags are not merely decoration. They are Lincoln's proclamation made visible, his call for a day of thanksgiving, stitched into cloth and hung defiantly against the cold. Only days ago, the president himself stood not far from here, delivering words that will outlast both brick and timber, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. I pause beneath the fawn stalk's shadow, my gaze rising toward its windows. I imagine the townsfolk who ascended its stair tonight, holding lanterns as they leaned out to look across the rooftops. They see not armies now, but a community scarred and mending. They whisper the address, repeating it to one another as if reciting a prayer. From an open window above, I catch the faint strains of song, a hymn carried by a family gathered in one of the upper rooms. Their voices drift into the night, fragile yet steady. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. The words seem almost paradoxical here, where blessings are measured against the tally of graves. Yet that paradox defines this Thanksgiving. Gratitude has not erased grief. It lives beside it, as inseparable as shadow from flame. The Fahnestock building itself seems to embody this tension. Its structure is whole, yet its soul is scarred by what it has witnessed. I reach out, pressing my palm against its cold brick. The stone feels solid, unyielding, but in my mind, it trembles still with the echoes of July. Cannon fire booming, townsfolk sobbing, officers issuing orders as if words could stop the tide. Now, it trembles with something else, the fragile weight of hope, the hope that Lincoln's proclamation might stitch the nation together as surely as these flags stitch color against frost, the hope that gratitude can grow even from soil, still dark with blood. I step back, my breath fogging before me, and whisper to the night, new birth of freedom. May these bricks hold it. May these voices carry it. May this town live it. Leaving the square, my path draws me toward Chambersburg Street. The air here feels colder, as though the night deepens faster along these blocks. Ahead, the Troxel House stands, a modest brick home, dignified in its simplicity. By appearance, it is whole. But like so many structures in Gettysburg, it carries scars invisible at first glance. In July, an artillery shell tore into this house. The explosion ripped brick and plaster, shattering glass, sending fear and smoke through rooms meant only for family life. Though repairs have been made, bricks patched, windows boarded, the house still wears its wound. The patched places stand out against the original brick, like scars on flesh that never quite fade. I pause at the walkway, the crunch of my boots startling a crow perched on the fence. It flaps into the night, its wings beating the air in a rush that sounds almost like memory itself, fleeing into darkness. The door of the Troxel house glows faintly, light spilling from within. Through a window, I glimpse the outline of a family gathered around a table. Their supper is modest: bread, perhaps some preserved apples, a small joint of meat. But what catches my breath is not the food. It is the black wreath hung quietly on the doorframe, a symbol as common now as lanterns, marking homes where death has knocked. Thanksgiving here is not abundance. It is survival. It is gratitude whispered through grief, spoken not in feasting, but in fragile hymns. From within, I hear it, voices rising in song, tentative yet resolute. Come, ye thankful people, come. Raise the song of harvest home. The hymn drifts into the night, thin as smoke, yet it steadies against the frost. I lean against the fence, listening. I imagine the family inside, perhaps a mother leading her children in song, her voice trembling but strong. Perhaps an empty chair at the table, left in memory of a son who will never return. Perhaps a father staring into the candlelight, hearing in the hymn not comfort but duty, to endure, to continue, to believe that sorrow can bend into gratitude. I close my eyes, letting the hymn wash over me. Each note feels like defiance. Each word feels like a vow. Even broken rafters cannot silence gratitude. Even boarded windows cannot block out hope. When the hymn ends, silence returns, heavier now. I open my eyes to the boarded window, the patched brick, the wreath dark against the frost. The house seems to breathe with both loss and resolve, its very walls embodying the paradox of this Thanksgiving. I step closer, pressing my hand against the patched section of brick. The mortar feels rough, uneven, a scar poorly hidden. I whisper, "You carry your wound, but you stand. May gratitude steady you. May memory not crush you. May hope yet rise within your walls." The house offers no reply, only the faint glow of candles flickering against the window pane. The Fahnestock building and the Troxel house, two structures, one towering, one modest, yet both entwined in this Thanksgiving's truth. One carries the echo of command and proclamation, of Lincoln's words lifting a weary nation toward unity. The other carries the echo of shattering shells, of grief pressed into walls, of families giving thanks beneath scars. Together they remind me, Thanksgiving in Gettysburg is not a holiday of abundance. It is a holy pause in the shadow of loss. Gratitude here is not feasting. It is survival, sung in fragile hymns, whispered in candlelight, lived beneath rafters that still remember. As I step back into the night, the town square hums faintly with lanterns and hymns. My breath fogs before me. My boots crunch against the cobbles, and the stars wheel slowly above. Each step carries me deeper into Gettysburg's Thanksgiving, where Lincoln's call for unity mingles with bullet scars, and where gratitude is not easy, but it is alive. And in that paradox, I hear the heart of Gettysburg itself, steady, scarred, but still beating. The road westward slopes gently upward, drawing me away from the town square into broader fields silvered by frost. The houses thin here, replaced by rail fences and bare trees, their branches black against the November sky. My breath escapes in white clouds, each exhale lingering a moment before dissolving into the chill. The night feels wider now, less hemmed in by walls, more open to memory and to ghosts. Ahead rises the Lutheran Theological Seminary, its red brick mass crowned by a white cupola that gleams faintly under the moon. Perched on Seminary Ridge, it dominates the landscape like a watchman, its gaze sweeping across the fields that in July became the crucible of war. Even at a distance, the building carries an aura of endurance, scarred but standing, solemn yet steadfast. As I draw near, my boots crunch over the frozen ground, echoing faintly in the stillness. The seminary looms above me now, its windows dark, save for a few faint glimmers where lamps burn. In July, these halls overflowed with the wounded, stretchers jammed shoulder to shoulder, surgeons bent under the pressure of life and death, lanterns casting shadows that danced across blood-stained floors. The smell then would have been unbearable. Chloroform, iron, smoke, and sweat, all mingling into a fog of suffering. Now, on this Thanksgiving night, the building has returned to its original purpose. Its classrooms are reopening, the voices of students once again murmuring prayers and reciting theology. Yet the transformation is incomplete. Chalkboards in some rooms still bear faint notations scrawled hastily by army surgeons, measurements of wounds, counts of amputations, records of lives lost and lives saved. In corners, scraps of cloth bandages lie half buried in dust, too soaked with memory to be swept clean. I pause at the threshold, my hand brushing the cool iron of the door handle. The wood smells faintly of polish, as though someone has worked hard to restore its dignity. But no amount of scrubbing can erase what was endured here. These walls once heard hymns and lectures. Then they heard groans and prayers whispered in desperation. Tonight, they hear both at once. Fragile thanksgiving layered over the echoes of agony. I step inside. The corridor stretches before me, its boards creaking beneath my boots. The air is cool and faintly acrid, as if the scent of antiseptic still lingers. Along the walls hang portraits of professors long gone, their painted eyes solemn, their presence a reminder of continuity. Yet even their dignity feels muted, for they, too, have watched the seminary transformed into a theater of suffering. In a classroom to my left, the faint light of a lantern flickers. Inside, benches are neatly arranged again, chalkboards scrubbed. But in my mind's eye, I see stretchers laid where students now sit. Men writhing beneath rough blankets, surgeons wiping their hands in basins of bloodied water. A hymn book lies open on the lectern. I imagine a professor leading prayer, his voice steady but cracked, asking for peace in a place that knew only pain. The seminary embodies both endurance and transformation. Thanksgiving, not for plenty, but for survival. I climb the narrow staircase toward the cupola, each step groaning beneath my weight. The air grows colder, sharper as I ascend. The stairs spiral tighter, the walls pressing in, until at last I emerge into the open space at the top. From here, the world spreads wide. Moonlight silvers the fields below, washing the ridges and valleys in a pale glow. Frost sparkles on the stubble of harvested fields, turning them into ghostly seas of light. In July, this view would have been thick with smoke, cannon fire rolling across the ridges, musket lines flaring, men surging and falling in desperate waves. Officers once climbed to this very perch, their telescopes scanning the chaos, their hearts clenched around the lives of thousands. Now, silence reigns. No cannon thunder, no musket crack, only the sigh of wind through bare trees and the distant creak of a farmhouse shutter. Yet the silence feels heavy, as though it carries within it every scream that once split this air. The ridge itself remembers, and from this vantage, the memory is inescapable. I lean against the wooden frame, my breath visible in the cold. My eyes trace the fields below. McPherson's Ridge, where Union cavalry fought desperately on the first day. Seminary Ridge itself, where lines buckled and bent. The town beyond, its rooftops now patched but still bearing scars. Each landmark gleams softly under the moon, yet I see them as they were, swarming with men, torn by iron, soaked in blood. I whisper into the night, how many of those who lay beneath these rafters lived to hear Lincoln's proclamation? And how many lie forever in these fields, their ears filled only with silence? The wind offers no answer, only a low moan that sounds almost like memory sighing. It was here, in the wake of Gettysburg's victory, that Lincoln's path turned toward his great words. Only weeks after the guns fell silent, Sarah Josepha Hale's long campaign for a national day of thanks found fertile ground in the president's heart. And so, on October 3rd, his hand, guided by William Seward's pen, declared the last Thursday of November a day of thanksgiving and praise. But Lincoln's call was no feast day proclamation. It was not a holiday of abundance, but of humility. He invited citizens to gather in gratitude, yes, but also in penitence, to mourn the dead, to comfort widows and orphans, to pray for healing and unity. It was a proclamation forged in grief as much as in hope, a recognition that thanksgiving must coexist with sorrow. Standing here in the seminary cupola, I feel the weight of that truth. The men who once filled these halls, many never saw November's frost. Those who survived carry scars that no hymn can fully soothe. And yet, Lincoln asked them, and us, to give thanks, to search amid ruin for the stubborn light of gratitude. From this height, I imagine families across Gettysburg tonight, gathered around modest tables, their hymns fragile but sincere. Some pray for sons still in the field, others grieve for those who will never return. Black wreaths hang from doors, yet candles burn in windows. The paradox of this Thanksgiving is etched across every home. Grief and gratitude woven together, each incomplete without the other. The seminary itself embodies this paradox. It endured transformation from a place of learning to a place of agony, and now back again. Yet it cannot be what it was, not fully. Its walls are layered with memory, its timbers steeped in the cries of July, and yet it still stands. It still shelters. It still witnesses. As I gaze across the moonlit fields, I realize that the seminary has become more than a building. It is a vessel of memory, a silent witness to both despair and resilience. Its survival is itself an act of thanksgiving, not for abundance, but for endurance, not for victory alone, but for the possibility of healing. I rest my hands on the wooden railing, my eyes fixed on the frost-glittering fields. I think of Lincoln's words, spoken days ago at the cemetery nearby, that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. From this height, those words echo against the silence, blending with the night wind until they feel stitched into the very soil. And I wonder, perhaps Thanksgiving itself is this, holding grief and gratitude together, refusing to let either drown the other. Perhaps the seminary's scars are not its weakness, but its testimony, a reminder that even shattered places can hold hope. At last I turn, descending the spiral stairs once more. The air warms as I near the ground, though the scent of chalk dust and old antiseptic still lingers. I pass a classroom where desks have been arranged again, hymnals stacked neatly on shelves. Yet in the corner lies a forgotten bandage, its cloth stiff with age. I pause, kneeling to touch it lightly. It crumbles at my fingers, but its memory does not. I whisper, "Even you are a kind of prayer. You remind us what was endured." Then I step back into the night, the seminary looming silent behind me, the cupola gleaming pale against the sky. My breath fogs in the air. My boots crunch over frost, and the ridge stretches away beneath the stars. The seminary has shown me what Thanksgiving in Gettysburg truly means. Not feasting, not forgetting, but enduring. Gratitude here is not loud, not extravagant. It is quiet, scarred, and steady, like the building itself, standing against wind and time, holding its witness for all who will come. The cobblestones of Gettysburg's town square crunch faintly beneath my boots as I step into its broad openness. In July, I passed here at dusk, when rumor buzzed in every shadow, when farmers whispered of Confederate riders and shopkeepers peered nervously at horizons already shaking with the pulse of armies. Then, the square seemed alive with dread, its very air taut with anticipation. Tonight, on Thanksgiving, it lies hushed, solemn, as though the earth itself exhales after months of grief. Union flags hang from windows and storefronts, some bright and newly sewn, others tattered and smoke-stained from battle. They stir faintly in the night air, their fabric whispering against wood, each one both proclamation and prayer. Gas lamps burn steady along the edges of the square, casting amber halos across the cobbles. Their light spills onto the faces of townsfolk, moving slowly, deliberately, as if every step must be measured against the memory of July's thunder. At one corner, a newsboy lifts his voice, not with the frantic cry of casualty lists, but with a new refrain. "Lincoln declares Day of Thanksgiving." His thin voice carries, echoing off brick facades, and I pause to listen. The words themselves feel miraculous. Months ago, no one could have imagined newsboys shouting of a holiday rather than a battle. The boys' stack of papers rustles in the wind, their ink announcing unity in a town still stitched with sorrow. Yet even here, gratitude walks beside grief. Black wreaths hang heavy against doors, symbols of families who will not gather whole tonight. Some houses show multiple wreaths, each a silent ledger of loss. A widow passes me slowly, her shawl pulled tight around thin shoulders, two children clinging to her skirts. Their faces are pale, their eyes too old for their years. She nods faintly as we meet eyes, but her lips do not smile. This, too, is Thanksgiving. Gratitude measured against what can never be restored. I turn my gaze toward the courthouse, its clock tower steady against the night sky. In July, men crowded here, anxious for word, ears straining for hoofbeats or cannon. Tonight, the clock's hands point calmly toward the evening hour, its bell silent until morning. It presides over the square, not as a herald of chaos, but as a sentinel of fragile order, marking the passage of a holiday no one in this town will ever forget. As I walk slowly through the square, I recall how it felt in the summer. Voices taut, shutters slammed, horses tied hastily to posts as rumors thickened. Mothers gathered children close. Men leaned toward one another in tense clusters, each whispering what they'd heard from the roads. Lee is coming. They're at Chambersburg. The rebels are near. The square then was restless, charged with fear, the air itself trembling. Now, months later, it is the same space but transformed. The restlessness has given way to solemnity. Families move not with haste, but with reverence. Where once dread pooled in every corner, tonight quiet gratitude flickers, fragile but real. The contrast feels almost unbearable, as though the cobblestones themselves remember every hurried footfall, every whispered warning, and now carry the weight of hushed thanksgiving in their seams. I pause by a hitching post where, in July, I had imagined couriers dashing through with orders. Tonight, a lantern swings gently from its iron hook, its glow steady against the cold. Beneath it, a soldier sits on the step, one leg missing below the knee. A crutch leaned against the wall beside him. His cap rests in his hands, his eyes lowered as though deep in prayer. I do not disturb him, but I whisper softly into the night. Even gratitude here is scarred. From the square, the toll of bells begins, slow, resonant, not warning of attack, but calling for worship. Their deep notes fold through the night air, gathering the town toward one place, Christ Lutheran Church. Its steeple rises just beyond the square, pale against the starlit sky, its silhouette both familiar and enduring. In July, those bells tolled urgently, warning townsfolk of the oncoming storm. Tonight, they ring steady, solemn, a summons not to fear, but to reflection. I follow their sound, my boots clicking softly on the frosted cobblestones. The closer I draw, the fuller the toll becomes, each note lingering in the air, overlapping with the next, weaving a fabric of reverence. Families converge on the church, lanterns swinging in their hands, shawls wrapped close against the cold. The street smells faintly of smoke and bread, mingled with the sharper scent of frost. The church doors stand open, golden light spilling outward into the night. I pause in the doorway, letting the warmth wash over me. Inside, the pews are full. Men, women, children, and soldiers all gathered shoulder to shoulder. The air hums with hymns rising softly, fragile voices lifting words of thanks even as eyes glisten with tears. The wood of the pews creaks as people shift, their heads bowed, their hands clasped tightly together. At the front, a minister reads from Lincoln's proclamation, his voice steady, though the congregation shifts with emotion. They are invited to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November next as a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father. The words seem to hover in the rafters, mingling with the candle smoke that curls upward, softening into the beams above. Widows clutch children close, their faces buried in shawls. Soldiers bow their heads, some pressing caps against chests, others wiping eyes with rough hands. In the back, an old man leans on his cane, his lips moving silently in prayer. From the doorway, I whisper, Gettysburg's first Thanksgiving is not feast but lament turned into hope. And the church seems to answer, not with words, but with the collective breath of a people daring to be grateful while still surrounded by scars. The hymn swells, voices rising on lines of praise that sound almost fragile, as though every word carries the weight of loss. Yet in that fragility, there is strength, the strength of people who choose to sing even when silence might be easier. The rafters, once echoing with groans when the church served as a field hospital, now resound with voices lifted toward heaven. I close my eyes and let the sound wash over me. It is not triumphant, not jubilant, but steady. This is the music of survival, of endurance, of faith carried through fire. It is gratitude sharpened by grief, a thanksgiving forged in sorrow. As the hymn fades, a prayer rises for the wounded, for the widowed, for the orphans left in the war's wake, for peace to come swiftly, for unity to be restored. The congregation murmurs, Amen, their voices layered with weariness, but also with resolve. In that sound, I hear Lincoln's hope, his call for the nation to bind up its wounds, to move forward not in forgetfulness, but in humility. When at last I step back into the night, the church bells toll again, their notes folding over the rooftops and out into the fields beyond. The square lies quiet, lanterns glowing steadily, flags stirring faintly in the cold breeze. Families walk slowly homeward, their breaths rising in clouds, their steps measured. The wounded soldier still sits beneath the hitching post, but now he hums faintly, the tune of the hymn carrying with him into the dark. I turn once more to the square, remembering how it felt in summer, buzzing with rumor, trembling with dread. Tonight, it holds a different air, chilled with sorrow, yes, but lifted slightly by the fragile thread of unity Lincoln has called for. The contrast is stark. Then anticipation of slaughter. Now, the weary attempt at gratitude. Both truths live in these cobblestones, and both will linger long after tonight. I lift my face to the stars, bright above the frosted rooftops, and whisper, gratitude itself is defiance against despair. And so, under the tolling bells of Christ Lutheran, I take my leave of Gettysburg. The streets that once braced for carnage now breathe with hymns. The square that once trembled with rumor now stands hushed with solemn thanksgiving. The town, scarred yet steadfast, embodies the nation itself, seeking to balance grief with gratitude, despair with hope. As my steps carry me away, the bells toll on, each note steady against the silence of the fields, each one a reminder that even in the shadow of war, a people can choose to give thanks. Rest easy, friends. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off,